British politics at the moment is pretty much in a very rightward trend. Reform UK are dominating. The Labour Party is failing miserably to kind of capitalise on the mandate that it got in the last general election in 2024. People are, generally speaking, kind of annoyed with the Labour Party. They are, kind of unsurprisingly, following a path of kind of a flaccid, impotent, uninspiring, warmed over Toryism, warmed over conservatism. And they're chucking in loads of reformish rhetoric about immigration and stuff, trying to claw back support from those people who have defected from Labour to join Reform. And the overall narrative is that Reform UK are the government in waiting. 2029 is the next general election in the UK, and the opinion polls show that Reform UK are leading. They're the most popular party, and so it's looking kind of grim for those amongst us, who I include myself, who are toward the left of the kind of traditional political spectrum. So with this in mind, is there any hope for the left? And what is the potential for Jeremy Corbyn and Zara Sultana's new party to make a difference and to kind of galvanise the political left in this country and to bring back left-leaning politics into the mainstream? That's what I'm going to talk about in this video. So just to give you for those of you who might not know, just to give you a potted history of UK politics, if we go back to, say, the last half century. So the Labour Party was created in, I think, around about 1900. Prior to that, the working class, the new working classes, didn't really have a political voice, a mainstream political voice. But out of the trade unions, eventually the Labour Party was formed. And the Labour Party, for the first, say, 50 years of its existence, 50, 60 years of its existence, was pretty much the political wing of the trade union movement. And as a result, much of its politics would be today considered to be pretty left-wing, very radical by today's standards. So they were all about nationalising resources, nationalising infrastructure, nationalising, high taxation and all this sort of stuff. Really, these kind of bread and butter kind of left-wing politics. And they didn't get into power much until 1945. I find it fascinating. Just the other day, for some reason, I was reading up on the Blitzkrieg in World War II, and I was reading up on. I was thinking about what it must have been like for people living in England at the time, as it is for anybody living in any war zone, but particularly here in England. Some of my neighbours here who are in their 80s might remember, or 90s will remember some of the Blitz era. And I was reading up about Winston Churchill and the Battle of Britain and all that sort of stuff, and the Blitz. And as much as I'm of course I'm not a cheerleader for imperialism, particularly not British imperialism or anything like that. You have to give respect where respect's due for those normal, regular men and women who fought in the skies over the UK, and also who fought at sea and on a land to resist the Nazi threat. It doesn't matter really when you're talking about war. It doesn't really matter. There's an extent to which you've got to put aside the politics of those who are in power. Of course, these wars that are being fought were not being fought for the interests of ordinary working people. They were being fought for the interests of the wealth holders, the power holders, But the sacrifices that those regular, everyday people had to make during World War II and after World War II, with all of the rationing and the austerity and all that sort of stuff, you must be respected, as does the sacrifices of all of the people around the world who, when the lions fight, the grass gets trampled, or something like that. These regular, ordinary people who were sent out to do the killing and all that sort of stuff. But anyway, I was thinking about that, and I was thinking about how Winston Churchill's stock must have been so high as the leader who led Britain through to victory, in World War II, as the narrative goes. Obviously, the United States and in particular the Soviet Union were absolutely and India were absolutely critical to the success, the defeat of the Nazis and the the fascists in Italy and the Japanese. But in 1944 actually, while World War II was still happening, the British people voted in Clement Attlee's Labour government. They voted in a left-wing government. For the first time, the Labour Party got a massive landslide victory on the back of the promise to create a national health service, to create a national education service, to nationalise things, to redistribute wealth and all these sorts of things, And that was what the people voted for, showing the strength of feeling for the strength of desire for change. The ordinary people in Britain had enough. So anyway, mid-20th century, the political status quo was still kind of fairly leftish. Even the Conservatives are fairly leftish. But what happened in the 1970s in particular was once the cozy, post-war consensus started to break down, the economies of, Europe and America and all that sort of stuff started to crumble and capitalism went into one of its many crises. Then you saw a break from the Keynesian, centre-left orthodoxy, and you saw the rise of Thatcherism and Reaganism. And Thatcherism and Reaganism are all about pushing the rhetoric of private property, individualism, small government, i.e. what it really means is selling off common assets, selling off common land, selling off common wealth, basically, and selling it off to their friends, their rich friends. That's what was basically going on. But as I've talked about in some of my other videos, it was very, very effective rhetoric in the UK in particular, accompanied by things like the right to buy policy, which turned would-be Labour stronghold supporters into Thatcherite, Thatcherite lovers, basically. So the Labour Party went into a long period, I think it was about 18 years, of being out of power as Thatcher and her successors dominated. Then what happened was the Labour Party itself, under Tony Blair, turned itself into New Labour. It shed a lot of the left-wing stuff to make itself palatable to the elites. Rupert Murdoch very famously switched sides and started to support the new Labour government. And so Labour came into power for a long time. But what has really happened since then is that there hasn't really been a real left in mainstream British politics. The centre of gravity in mainstream British politics is very much toward the right on various issues. And we're now in a position now, crisis after crisis after crisis, with the financial crisis 2008. You had which helped to trigger the Brexit referendum, which is a constitutional crisis here in the UK, which helped to lead to, obviously we had COVID and the pandemic, which exacerbated all of this stuff. And then you had the general election in 2024, which saw Labour come in. But Labour are basically on borrowed time here because the Conservatives were so terrible that people just had to vote for Labour to just get rid of them. And now we have a situation where, because of the rhetoric around immigration, which will not go away, and I will talk about that one day, the average person in Britain just thinks that the answer to all of the problems that Britain has is to stop immigration, stop the boats, all that sort of stuff. And so here we are. Reform looks like it's, a shoo-in to enter into government, or at least into a coalition with maybe the Conservatives, if they would have that. Where's the left? Keir Starmer has ostracised and booted out a bunch of left-leaning MPs. Two of those, Zara Sultana and Jeremy Corbyn, have decided to make a political party, and they haven't named it yet. And this is where it's starting to get a little bit interesting, because there's always been a question in a lot of our minds here, is that why is there not a left version of something like a reform? And perhaps this new party could be it. And I'm going to just quickly touch on this opinion poll that's been released by the polling company Ipsos, which found that 1 in 5 Britons would consider voting for a new left-wing party, rising to 1 in 3 young people and Labour voters. I'll put some graphics on the screen so you can see it here. And it's, as the headline says, 20% of people who voted for Labour, 20% of all people in this poll, 2,000 people, said they would vote for this new party. 33% of 16 to 34-year-olds said they'd vote for them. 22% of 35 to 54. Only 9% of 55 plus. Gives you an idea about the general political climate of those older people. Remember, Britain is generally an older country. Older people are having less children and people are living longer. And those older people tend to be more right-leaning. Interestingly, 33% of Labour voters said they would vote for this party, 43% of Green Party voters and 18% of Lib Dem voters would vote for this party. And what that's showing is that just as Reform dug into the Conservative Party vote, in many cases helping Labour MPs to come to power, this party potentially could, if obviously this is just an opinion poll years away from 29, but if these figures were to translate into votes and the votes were to be distributed in such a way that, because we don't have a proportional representation here in the UK, this sort of stuff is kind of meaningless if all of these people who say they're going to vote for Labour and so forth all live in just the same few areas and they're not spread in high enough concentrations across the country. But if, in theory, this could lead to a splitting of the Labour vote, and in particular splitting of the Green Party vote, half of the Labour voters and nearly 2/3 of Green Party voters said they'd vote for this new party. Now, what's interesting is that when they were asked if they would vote for a coalition or an alliance, how do they word it? Yeah, when they were asked if they would vote for an alliance between the Greens and this new party, 30% of the overall respondents said that they would, which is huge. More than half of young people, 16 to 34-year-olds, said they would vote for such an alliance. 32% of 35 to 54-year-olds and even 13% of over 55 said they would. And then amongst Labour Party voters, 46% of them would vote for such an alliance. And again, 63% of Green Party voters. Even 12% of Conservative and Reform voters said they would vote for such an alliance. And 30% of Lib Dem voters. Now, this is very interesting stuff. Obviously, like I said, we're very early on, but there are signs here that there is appetite amongst British people for a genuine left-wing politics to enter into power. And I'm going to be watching this really, really closely to see how this pans out, because it is depressing to think that Nigel Farage and his motley crew of shysters and bandwagon jumpers are basically heading for number 10, according to all of the narrative. And I very much hope that we're going to see a shift in this. I very much hope, I hope that Corbyn and Sultana will not just try and be all demagogish about it like Farage, but they will look to genuinely build some kind of grassroots-based, union-based, everyday people, community-based political party that can offer people some genuine hope for genuine change and not just moving the deck chairs around on the Titanic, which most people seem to be talking about Britain as being, in a state of terminal decline, So let's see how it goes. Let's see how this pans out. Let me know your thoughts on this. Do you think that there's any hope in this, or is this just a false dawning in the current reality of the British political climate? So take care for now. Thank you for watching. My name's Eli Wananda. I have many other videos that you might like. There's a video here which YouTube recommends, and also a video here which follows on nicely from the topic of this video. Take care of yourselves, and I'll speak to you soon. Peace.